I wanted to test my limits, so I invited him over. For weeks I had been wrestling with the idea, playing it over and over in my head like a record stuck on the same note. Life had been predictable, safe, and if I was being completely honest, a little too routine. I was a woman who had always lived by the book. Never late for work, never reckless with money, never bold enough to risk embarrassment or rejection. My friends used to tease me that I lived inside an invisible box that I had built for myself. And the truth is, they weren't wrong. But something inside me had begun to stir. Maybe it was the way I watched other people chase after adventures, or maybe it was the quiet longing I carried when the house was silent, when the evenings stretched out endlessly. Whatever it was, I knew I wanted to break free, even if just for a single night. The person I thought of inviting was Ethan, a name that seemed to carry its own mystery. Ethan was someone I knew well enough to trust, but not so well that I couldn't keep a certain distance if I needed to. He was a friend of a friend, someone who had always hovered around the edges of my circle, showing up at gatherings with his easy laugh and calm presence. There was something magnetic about him, the way he seemed completely comfortable in his own skin, unafraid to speak his mind, unafraid to try new things. He was the kind of person who jumped into lakes without testing the water first, who signed up for challenges just to see how far he could push himself. Watching him always made me wonder what it would feel like to live even a fraction of that boldly. When I finally sent him the message, my hands shook as if I had typed something forbidden. "Hey Ethan, I know this might sound unusual, but would you like to come over tomorrow evening? I have something in mind, and let's just say I want to test my limits a little." I stared at the message for 5 minutes before hitting send, convincing myself a dozen times that it was a bad idea. But once the little whoosh of the sent notification appeared, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The decision was out there now. It wasn't just a thought living in my head anymore. Ethan's reply came within minutes. "That sounds intriguing. I'll be there. What time?" That was it. Simple, direct, and without hesitation. The kind of response I expected from him. My heart raced as I set the time for 7 o'clock, already imagining how the evening might unfold, though I had no real plan beyond inviting him. That was the point, after all. To step into the unknown, to invite the unexpected, to test my limits in ways I never had before. The next day, I spent more time than I wanted to admit preparing. I cleaned the house thoroughly, as if Ethan was some kind of inspector, and not just a man coming over to spend a few hours. I cooked, though I wasn't sure if we'd even sit down for a proper meal. I even debated what to wear, something casual but not careless, something that made me feel like I was stepping out of the everyday version of myself. When the clock crept toward 7, I felt that nervous thrill that reminded me of being a teenager waiting for a date to arrive. When the knock finally came, my breath caught in my throat. Opening the door, I found Ethan standing there with that same confident smile that had always set him apart. "Hey," he said, his voice steady, eyes curious. He wasn't carrying flowers or wine or anything ceremonial. He had just shown up as himself, which somehow felt even more reassuring. "Come in," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. The evening began innocently enough. We sat on the couch, talking about the usual things, work, friends, the little annoyances of everyday life. But there was a charge in the air, a weight in the silences between our words, like both of us were waiting for the moment when the ordinary conversation would shift into something else. I kept reminding myself that this was my choice, that I had invited him here to push myself, to step beyond comfort and predictability. At one point, Ethan leaned back, studying me with those steady eyes. "So," he said, his tone playful but edged with seriousness, "you said you wanted to test your limits. What exactly does that mean?" I swallowed, my throat dry, and laughed softly. "I'm not even sure myself. I guess it means doing something I've never dared to do. Letting go of the rules I always hold myself to. Maybe it's as simple as letting someone else see me the way I really am, without hiding behind being careful all the time." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he understood. "That's brave, you know. Most people never admit they want more. They just settle. The fact that you even reached out says a lot." His words sank into me deeper than I expected. For years, I had thought of myself as ordinary, even invisible. Hearing someone acknowledge the courage in my small act of inviting him over made me feel different, like maybe I wasn't so stuck after all. The hours stretched on. We talked about fears, dreams, the things we both regretted, and the things we secretly hoped for. With every word, I felt layers peeling back, the walls I had built around myself slowly crumbling. The more I shared, the freer I felt. And the more Ethan listened, truly listened, the more I realized that testing my limits wasn't about doing something outrageous. It was about letting myself be vulnerable, about trusting someone enough to let them see the real me. At one point, when the conversation dipped into silence, Ethan leaned closer and said, "You're stronger than you think. And you're definitely braver than you give yourself credit for." That night became a turning point in ways I couldn't have predicted. Ethan didn't just stay for dinner. He stayed long after the plates had been cleared. We sat outside on the porch, looking at the stars, talking about everything and nothing. The cool night air wrapped around us, and I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of rejection, not of judgment, not of stepping outside my comfort zone. When Ethan finally left, sometime past midnight, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart still racing. I had tested my limits, and though it hadn't looked the way I first imagined, it had been more powerful than I could have hoped. I had learned that courage doesn't always mean jumping off cliffs or making dramatic choices. Sometimes it's as simple as opening the door, inviting someone in, and allowing yourself to be seen. In the days and weeks that followed, something inside me shifted permanently. I started saying yes more often, to invitations, to new experiences, to the small adventures I used to brush aside. I took risks at work, spoke up when I had ideas, laughed louder without worrying who was listening. My friends noticed the change, though they couldn't quite put their finger on it. I just felt lighter, freer, more alive. Ethan and I kept in touch. Sometimes we met for coffee, sometimes for long walks where we talked about the next limits we both wanted to test. He became a reminder of that night, of the choice I made to break free from my own caution. But more than that, he became a friend, someone who encouraged me without pushing, someone who saw me not as the cautious woman I had been, but as the person I was becoming. Looking back, I realize now that inviting him over wasn't really about him at all. It was about me. It was about daring to choose something uncertain, something unscripted, something that scared me just enough to make me grow. And in that choice, I found a part of myself I thought I had lost.